right, everybody. Welcome to the Courage Economy podcast. Today, we're going to extend our conversation where we left off on episode 3. So, we're on episode 4 now. Episode 3 was about important work. Why is work important? Well, we know work's important because if work's not important, then people have no problem lying about it. When work is important, the truth becomes less costly than a lie. People want to make sure that the work is done effectively, efficiently. They want the work to be done well because it's important. If it's not important, then they don't care too much. They might be there to get a paycheck, but they don't care particularly about the work because the work is not that important. So I think it's clear, and it's very clear to see why important work is so necessary for a courage economy. If you don't have important work, it's very difficult to make truth telling less costly than a lie. So, questions I get though are like, okay, well, that's fine, but all the work I have is not really important. Okay, that's fine. A lot of work we do is not important. Everything we do can't be critically important. There's a lot of work that's necessary. Necessary is fine, needs to happen, but not important. Best thing to do, though, is not lie about it. How many times do I see people saying that this thing is critically important when everybody knows it's not important? And then when you do have something important, they don't believe you because you say everything's important. A better strategy is to say, you know what, this isn't that important. We got to get it done. Let's bang it out and do a great job. People can get their head around that. Everybody knows they sometimes have to do unimportant work. Being truthful about it takes the power out of the lie. You're respecting people, respecting their intelligence enough to tell them the truth. And when you do have something important and you say it's important, then they're likely to believe you, or they're much more likely to believe you. So, how do people know that the work is important? How do you know the work is important? Well, there's people don't listen to what you say about the importance of the work. They watch how you behave around the work, how you act with the work. And that means things like leaders talk about it, they focus on it, they measure it, they show up for it, they fund it, they have high standards around it. They give autonomy to the people figuring out the work, the autonomy to figure it out. They protect important work. If it's important, then they're not going to let, a bunch of other stuff get in the way of it. They sustain attention to important work well beyond its launch. Like, if it's important, they don't just say, okay, go off and do it. They pay attention to it. Important work, they subtract for it. They make room for important work. If it's important, then I'm going to make sure that there's enough resources for it. I'm going to make sure there's enough time and resources to get this work done. And most importantly, maybe they connect what it's for. Like, why is this important? What is this accomplishing for us? I once worked with a nuclear power plant. It was the least safe power plant in the country. And the important work was to make it the safest power plant in the country. And how did we know it was safe? How did we know that work was important? Well, because all of the things I just outlined were done to demonstrate to everybody that this work was critically important. So let's just kind of go through some of the lists that I gave you there and talk a little bit more deeply about it. Fund it. I mean, obviously, right? How often do you have this work? This is really critical, important work, but we're not going to really fund it. Well, if you don't fund it, then clearly it's not important. If it was important, you would fund it, like definitionally. So, I mean, that's like a no-brainer. If you're not willing to provide appropriate resources and tools and funding for it, then it can't possibly be that important. High standards. Important work deserves high standards. Honoring important work deserves high standards. If it's important, you care deeply about it, and you're not going to tolerate half measures, shortcuts, fudging around with everything. That's just not something you do with something that's critically important. And so leaders have high standards around that work. And they drive accountability around those standards. If there's not high standards, then you're definitionally sort of telegraphing that this isn't that important. They protect it. There's a lot of competing priorities. And if the work is important, then they try to protect that work from all those competing priorities. If you're involved in something that's super important and then a bunch of other nonsense comes along and they're like, well, hold on, go off and do this, or hey, we're going to have to take you off that and put you over here. I mean, unless that other work is equally important, then what are you doing? Is it really important? Or did you just tell me it's important? They sustain attention past the launch. I've been on a number of teams where you get on the team and it's super important, and then the leader kicks it off, and then you never see them again. They don't come to any meetings. They don't check in. Well, it wasn't that important, because if it was important, they would be there. For example, I've worked in the nuclear industry for a long time. A lot of stuff that happens in the nuclear industry is very important, like really important. Like if something goes wrong, there could be like bad stuff can happen. So I know what it looks like when something is important and it's treated as important. You do too. And as I said last time, how much unimportant work do we do? So people in the organization, they all can see what's important and what's not important, no matter what you say. So honoring important work means doing all of those things. Fund it, give people autonomy to do it, provide resources, time, pay attention to it, talk about it, measure it. People, when they see that, they're like, okay, this is important. When work is important, people tend to tell the truth. People tend to overcome their natural tendency to avoid discomfort and to tell the truth, to give the feedback, to challenge, to be curious, to accept questions, right? Like, this is my opinion. How many leaders say that this is the way it is? If somebody has a question, what? No, Thane, don't ask any questions. This is what we're doing. If it's important, then you would accept the questions, because your goal is to get to the right answer. Your goal is not to win. Your goal is to get to the correct answer. And the correct answer is gotten to by people wrestling with what that answer is and being willing to wrestle with it. And leaders who are willing to accept the challenge, right? When people ask a question and say, should we really do that? I'm not so sure. I think that's a bad idea. I led a talent acquisition function. I would always ask them, tell me why this is a dumb idea. And at first they were like, oh, no, it's not. It's a great idea. No, tell me why it's a dumb idea. And once they believed that I actually did want them to tell me it was a dumb idea, they would tell me. And wouldn't you know it, I don't actually have all the answers. I am not the smartest guy in the room. And some of their ideas actually made my ideas better. Or sometimes we just abandoned my idea and went with their idea because it was a better idea. But if I didn't ask the question, tell me why this is a dumb idea, I might not have ever heard it. When I did that, that was another way that they knew that this was important. He really does want the right answer. Another good way to check if something is important is, can you articulate its importance to your people? I sometimes tell leaders, why don't you recruit people for this project or this team? If you can't recruit anybody, do you want to work on this? Here's what it is. Here's why it's important. Here's how we're going to fund it. Do you want to work on this team? If they're like, nah, I'm not interested in working on that team. And then you go to someone else. If you can't get anybody to sign up for your team, then you might think about whether the work is important, or whether you have to go back and figure out how to articulate it If you can't really articulate its importance, then maybe it's not important. And if nobody wants to be involved with it, then maybe it's not all that important. People want to be involved with important things. People want to be, even if they're hard and difficult. So, try to recruit people. And if you can't recruit anybody, then you might consider that maybe what you're trying to do is not that important. And a lot of leaders I've worked with, they don't want to ask that question because they know it's not that important. And so they don't want the questions. So recruit people if you can't recruit them. Now, if you have people, we should not be holding people hostage to work that they don't want to do and are not interested in. We have plenty of work to do. Plenty of work. Now, if you find somebody that doesn't want to be involved in anything you do, then that's a different problem. That's like a performance management problem or something. Or that's like a, ask them to leave the organization problem. But, recruit people. And if you can't recruit anybody, there's your sign, right? That's a good sign. But you have to give people the leeway to say no, right? You have to honestly be like, yeah, you're allowed to say no. I want you to say no if you're not interested in this. So, important work. How do you know it's important? Well, we just talked about it. Everybody knows why. Everybody knows the characteristics of important work. And so it's important for you as a leader to make sure that you are demonstrating to your people that this work is important. And it's important for you as a leader not to tell people that unimportant work is important. That will ruin everything. No one will believe you. So I'll have something on my Substack about the characteristics of important work. Maybe I'll make a checklist and you can kind of go down like, am I doing all these things? And if you're doing all those things and you can generate, an understanding in people that why this work is important and they truly do believe it's important, then you will find that the impetus to tell the truth is greater in that circumstance. Because you have to have important work to do. Clearly, you run an organization, you do something, right? Something's got to be important. If you're not doing anything important, then I don't know what to tell you. But figure out how to demonstrate to people why the work they're doing is important. And again, like I said, everything is not important. Some things are important. Many things are just necessary. But don't lie about it. So you can find me out, as usual, Substack at The Courage Economy, thane.substack.com. You can find me at thanebelomo.com on my website. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Thane Belomo. Check me out or check it out. Check those areas out. And we'll see you next time.